Welcome to the Weaver Sews. I'm Daryl Lancaster. I compiled a number of videos to help create my 100 and 200 jackets, sort of a step-by-step, really focusing on particular areas and giving lots of background explanations on why. In the two jackets here that I constructed in the video demonstrations, I inserted welt pockets. The welt pocket pattern and directions are actually an add-on to a number of my patterns, and the link for that is in the show notes below. And of course, there is a step-by-step video to show how to put them in. But the actual 100 and 200 jacket patterns feature a patch pocket. This is a pretty roomy pocket, great for whatever you want to carry, and pretty much answers the pocket dilemma facing most women's clothing. I do get pushback in some of my classes about patch pockets. I think the primary reason is that two big patches right on the widest part of the hip makes people think you are drawing attention to an area you'd rather not draw attention to. I think that the location of said big patch influences this issue a lot. And certainly when a student who is short of fabric says, "Oh, I can use a different or contrasting fabric for the pocket," I try to discourage that, because nothing like two big patches of contrasting fabric to draw attention to an area you'd rather not draw attention to. Both of these jackets are hand woven and use my 100 and 200 jacket patterns, or a combination. Both of them have patch pockets. These are the pockets that come with the 100 and 200 jacket patterns, and detailed instructions for making these pockets are included, of course, in the detailed instructions for making the jackets. Those instructions are always free to download. I keep them separate from my patterns. Those, of course, you have to purchase. In both cases, the patch pockets tuck neatly into the front band or collar and sit along the lower edge of the jacket. And because I've carefully matched up the vertical stripes in this jacket and the vertical and horizontal patterning in this jacket, and neither pocket adds visual width to the hip because they mount on the center front and not on the side seam, these pockets are about as discreet as a patch pocket can get. So let's go through this step-by-step construction of this pocket. Obviously, these pockets are just a giant rectangle, and this whole process can be replicated for just about any jacket or vest you might want to make, not just my patterns. First, though, we need to talk about the layout. Even though this is, by garment standards, a small accompanying pattern piece and can fit on the fabric just about anywhere, you really need to be careful where you lay the pocket pattern in relation to the jacket front to get maximum invisibility. Yes, this is just a rectangle, but all garment pattern pieces must flip to create the left and right halves of the garment, and the pocket is no exception. There is a critical mark on the top corner of the pocket, which will be of immense help down the road. I've already recorded a video which talks about how important it is to cut hand-woven fabrics singly, but I would also do that if I were trying to carefully match up a pocket in a commercial fabric as well. This little mark in the shape of a square indicates the top center front of the pocket. It corresponds to a similar marking on the front edge of the jacket. If you alter the length of the jacket, keep in mind that this might change the location of the pocket dot and they will no longer match up, which makes it more difficult to lay out, especially if you have to line up horizontal or weft patterning. I suggest lengthening and shortening on the Z-line so that the pocket dot remains in position for matching the pocket. Just a tip here. If you shorten the jacket more than 3 inches and you don't shorten the pocket proportionately, you run the risk of having the pocket up underneath the bust line, which might not be what you were going for. Remember, I designed the pocket to sit on the lower edge of the jacket. And if that edge changes drastically in either direction, longer or shorter, you might want to rethink where you position the pocket in relation to the lower edge, or make the pocket shorter, longer, wider, or narrower. The square marking on the pocket indicates the actual top. I didn't do that one. Yeah, that sounded painful.
They're always painful.
The square marking on the pocket indicates the actual top of the pocket. The remainder of the pattern above that shows the self-facing and will be folded under during the construction process. So that pocket mark or square is actually a fold line. I usually try to cut the pocket piece directly under the corresponding front, lining up the front edges of both so that the little square pocket dots will be positioned on the same warp thread. Be very, very careful that the weft grain lines are completely perpendicular to the warp grain lines when cutting out the pocket. If you are off by a couple of threads, it will really show up on the pocket. Once the front and its corresponding pocket are cut out and tailor's tacks are added to the right side of the fabric to indicate the pocket markings and whatever else needs to be marked on the jacket front, keep the two together to help avoid confusion as to which pocket goes to which front. For brevity, I've gone ahead and stay-stitched the front and added a Hong Kong seam finish as described in the video on first steps. The pocket will be interfaced. Use the same pocket pattern to cut interfacing. One of the knit fusibles like Fusy Knit or a texturized inserted weft interfacing will work well here. I sell both in my shop. You don't want droopy pockets. There are 2 additional elements you'll need to cut out before we can begin construction of the pocket. You'll need some sort of lining fabric, whatever's appropriate. It won't be seen. It just nicely finishes off the inside of the pocket. There is a line on the pocket pattern that indicates where the lining stops. Cut out the lining to that indicator line. And finally, you'll need a stay to keep the pocket from stretching out at the top edge, because we constantly keep our hands and our lives in those pockets. We want the top to stay tidy and crisp. We talked about stays, or what to use to stabilize a seam, in the video on seams, particularly in the shoulder area. So for this pocket, I've chosen a strip of 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter pre-shrunk cotton twill tape. You'll need 2 strips the width of the pocket pattern, 1 for each pocket. Fuse the interfacing onto the back of each pocket. This is where the tailor's tack on the right side of the garment is really handy. You'll be fusing the interfacing to the wrong side. Look for the tack to be sure. The tack is on the right side of the fabric. Make sure the grain lines are straight as well. We covered fusing interfacing in a separate video. With right sides together, pin the top edge of the lining to the top edge of the fused pocket. Look for the tack to show which is the top of the pocket. stitch the two together with a 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeter seam. Open out the lining and press the seam allowances towards the lining. Here's the magic part. With wrong sides together, fold the pocket in half, which should correspond with the fold line indicated by the tailor's tack. Press the crease firmly across the top of the pocket. Open out the fold and lay the strip of twill or stay tape alongside the fold on the wrong side of the pocket self-facing. The long edge of the twill or stay tape will lay right alongside the fold line. Stitch through the center of the twill or stay tape. That stitching won't show since the tape lays against the self-facing and not the front of the pocket. You could also hand stitch both edges of the twill or stay tape for a cleaner finish. With right sides together, refold the pocket on the fold line, pinning the side opposite the tack and the lower edge. Leave the center front edge as defined by the tack open. You'll be stitching the lower and side edges with normal machine stitching using a 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, back stitching at both ends. When you come to the corner where the seam allowances intersect, which I've indicated with a pin, create a pivot by lifting the presser foot with the needle still in the fabric, turning the pocket 45 degrees, lowering the presser foot, turning the stitch length down to nothing, and taking a few reinforcing stitches right in the point of the corner. With the needle in, lift the presser foot, pivot the pocket to continue stitching up the side or across the bottom depending on which direction you're going. Lower the presser foot, return the stitch length to normal, and continue towards the end. Don't forget to backstitch. Grade the seam allowances by trimming the lining to 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter and the hand-woven seam allowance to 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter. Trim off corners to aid in turning. Turn the pocket through the front opening using a point turner to help form the corners. I like this one made from bamboo that I've had for years, but a plastic one from Dritz works just as well. Don't poke the corners. Gently roll the point of the pocket over the point turner, carefully forming a squared corner. Give the pocket a good press, keeping the lining just to the inside. Pin the pocket to the corresponding front, matching the center front edges and the pocket dot, and placing the lower edge of the pocket exactly 2 inches or 5 centimeters from the lower edge of the jacket. With a slightly longer stitch, attach the pocket by stitching right along the bottom edge through all layers, pivoting at the corner and ending at the top of the side with a small triangle to distribute the stress over a few warp threads instead of just one. Machine baste the front edge of the pocket to the front of the jacket 1/2 inch or 1.2 centimeters from the cutting line. Note that you'll be stitching in the opposite direction for the other pocket, starting with the little triangle at the top of the side seam. If you did everything correctly, your pocket should blend in and be less noticeable than just a patch on the front of the jacket. It should be sturdy and roomy, just like we like our pockets to be. One more thing. The 200 jacket has waist darts, and there is an optional version included in the pattern that converts the bust and waist darts into a princess seam. I'll cover creating a princess seam in another video. But keep in mind that when carefully matching the pockets in a bold vertical striped fabric, only the part of the garment section between the center front cutting line and the sewn dart or princess seam will match. The darts or princess seams will throw off the rest of the alignment. Certainly choosing a contrasting fabric for the side panels when creating princess seams is an option, and so is using the welt pocket instead. And of course, ignoring the misalignment is perfectly okay too, as long as the center front parts of the pocket line up. Don't let anyone tell you women's clothing doesn't have decent pockets. When you want to sew the garment yourself, you can have anything you want. I'm Daryl Lancaster for The Weaver Sews.